I'm Chris Hemsworth, and this is the lovely Cate Blanchett, and we're here in Australia, Queensland, working at the moment. And
not at the moment.
Not at this.
I mean, you never work.
Moment.
I've been working really, really hard.
I had a couple of hours of work today, so it was an easy one. During our work and working with you, you've spent. I've heard you talk about your work with UNHCR, and you're obviously very passionate about it. And was wondering if you could tell myself and the people at home who they are and what they do.
Well, yeah, UNHCR are a tried and true organisation that was established after the displacement crisis of the Second World War, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and so they have the mandate to deal with the issues and advocate that refugees face, because of course refugees are people who are fleeing from persecution and from terror. They're not migrants. It's a very different thing, but they also advocate for their rights under international law.
Sure. And why is it that their work is so important right now at this moment?
Well, since the Second World War, I mean, the refugee crisis that we see unfolding before our eyes is the largest displacement crisis since the Second World War. And 65 million people around the world. Of course, we know Syria, 4.8 million people displaced since 2011. Wow. But there's, South Sudan, Nigeria, Central African Republic, and half of that 65 million people are children. I mean, for you as a parent, of 3 and me as a mother of 4, that's really, it's gobsmacking to me. Yeah. And so the UNHCR and their partner organisations are the ones who are there on the ground delivering humanitarian relief, so shelter, food, medical assistance, but also the right to an education, because if you think about a child being displaced, the average displacement time for someone who's a refugee is between 17 and 19 years. Wow. And so that is an entire childhood gone. And so you think, how can these people return and hopefully rebuild their countries if they haven't been able to educate themselves? And so the thought for me as a parent about, my 14-year-old being out of school for 5 years, it's a devastating prospect. So UNHCR really do offer that assistance at the ground level, and these people are fleeing from very real terror, and UNHCR is often their only life raft.
Well, now you're a goodwill ambassador. What does that involve exactly?
Well, UNHCR have a series of goodwill ambassadors, and we travel into the field with the wonderful people from UNHCR and witness the work and meet with refugees. But we're not experts. I'm not a politician. I'm not an economist. I think our role mostly is to bear witness to and advocate for the rights of refugees, having met these people firsthand, and to try and build, I suppose, a bridge of compassion or empathy, because there's a lot of misinformation around, and understandably the world's in a very fragile place at the moment, and all of us, in the developing world and the developed world where we live, you can lock down and close up. And I think for me, certainly, having visited refugees in the environments which they have found themselves, it's very humbling, because you realise there's a lot of similarities between the things they value and the things I value and the things that perhaps people who've never met a refugee value. So I think that's how I sort of see the role.
Yeah, I think as a parent as well, it certainly makes you put yourself in their position, and I instantly start to think about, oh wow, if we were faced with this crisis, what would we do? How would we react? And hopefully other people, other countries would welcome us and support us. And I think it's a human being's response to want to help in that sense.
Yeah, and it's often those really seemingly minor things that can break people. And so having gone into Lebanon and Jordan with UNHCR and sat with families, it's the way they talk about their children. I was there in Azraq camp when a whole lot of people were coming off the berm, the border between Jordan and Syria. And they were some of the most vulnerable people. So they were women without husbands, often with their children or neighbours' children or close relatives, but mostly women and children. And there was one mother and her 6 children, and through an interpreter, they were just being registered with the UNHCR, so they were receiving blankets, food, a bucket and a place to sleep, and the relief that came over her face was just profound for me to witness. But there was a boy there who was a similar age to my eldest son, so 14, maybe 15, and I asked him when the last time he was in school, and he said 5 years ago. And so he had just arrived in the camp, and the fact that he was going to be able to continue, even for a morning, or two, in a week, to continue his studies. It's really important that people, are able to maintain that connection. But you do meet some remarkable people. It's a privilege, actually, sitting with them, because I do think if I was in that situation, would I have the same level of resilience and the same hope and generosity? Because there was one family I sat with in Zatri camp, which is the first camp that was set up basically in the headlights of the UNHCR vehicles. That's why all the roads are a bit sort of wonky, because there were 10,000 people a night coming over the border. And I sat with this amazing family, Abu Hassam, and their 3 children. You've got 3 kids. And my 8-year-old Iggy was with me, and they set out, they had nothing. They're living in a little hut that UNHCR has provided. The spread that they put out for us was, you think, that's everything they've got, and they were sharing it with us. And my 8-year-old was out there kicking the ball with a boy, and Hassam, their 13-year-old, wasn't outside. And I said, "Do you like soccer? Do you want to go and play? You don't have to sit with the adults and talk about boring stuff." And he said, "Oh, no, I don't really feel like it." And his mother said he was injured. He's got a shrapnel injury in his foot. So it wasn't until he got to the camp that he actually was able to learn to walk again. And the reason why they left is because they were at work one day, and they got a call that their village was under siege, and they tried to get back in, and they couldn't. And so their mother and the 3 kids were there, and she was still breastfeeding one of the children. And so for 2 days she couldn't get in to breastfeed her child. And they eventually begged a neighbour, got the kids out, and then went to a neighbouring town. And, they had to keep working because they wanted to support their children. And so their elderly mother was looking after the 3 kids. And then they got a call that the house was bombed. And so these children were injured by shrapnel and by falling debris, but they couldn't take them to a hospital, because if you've got shrapnel wounds, then the militia believes that you're the enemy, and no matter what your age, colour of your skin, you've killed. And so they knew this, so they were then on the run. And with her sister's children, because her sister and her brother-in-law were killed. So they had 5 children, elderly mother. They're the people who were fleeing, and they'd had some possessions with them, but as they got closer and closer to the border, and it wasn't a safe journey to get there, they just had to discard the baggages and run with the kids. And here they were, sharing absolutely everything they had, and with me. And I think, it's I was really humbled by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now there's the big UN summit is coming up in New York next Monday. What's that about, and how can it help?
Well, each year there's a summit. The UN holds a summit, and this year, obviously, in a very timely way, it's on the refugees and migrants. And so the focus will be on the 19th and 20th. And it's an historic moment, really, I think, because all the governments of the world will be there, and it's a chance for us as a people to say to urge our governments not only to act to find diplomatic and political solutions, but to step up and burden share, because as I said, there's a lot of displaced people, and yes, of course, it's in the Middle East, but it's worldwide, and about 86% of the world's refugees, remembering half of them are kids, are housed and being sheltered by developing countries who are ill-equipped to, if you think of Lebanon, for instance, where I've been, a quarter of their population are Syrian refugees. And so UNHCR are really calling for 10% of, say, for example, in Syria, calling for 10% of those vulnerable families to be resettled internationally. And so it's a chance where, in the lead-up, they've got a very important petition, which is, I should mention, to show solidarity, where you can all show solidarity with refugee experience. You know, there for the grace of God, go us all. And it's a petition. You can sign it on withrefugees.org to show that you care, and we've already got 1 million signatories. And it's a chance for the governments of the world to really reflect about what they can do to change the situation, because we can't put our head in the sand. It's not going away. And you know, if we can get over 1 million, my 3 fans might sign it, and you've
got more than that. I'm
5,722
they're going to sign
female fans. How many male fans do you have?
Not sure.
You've just got a lot of frenemies, I reckon.
Frenemies. They're fake fans. I kind of do them myself and set them up.
So that's really important, you know, because it's you can feel a bit powerless.
Yeah.
I think, you know, when you hear those astonishingly large figures, you know, you think of there's 65 million people fleeing from crisis, and that's the size of the UK or France. Yeah. But signing a petition and having your voice heard can urge change.
Well, and also hearing you talk about it and hearing the individual stories of these people certainly humanises it and makes it, I think, a much more personal motivation for all of us to say, yes, let's collectively stand up and do something about this.
Yeah.
So the UN summit's coming up. What else can all of us, people at home, do to help?
Well, I mean, I think language is a very powerful thing, and we'll probably get to that a bit later too when we talk about the film and the poem that we've done. But I think there's a lot of xenophobia around at the moment and a lot of misinformation, and so if you take the time to actually read about the individual stories, the human face of this crisis. And any time you encounter that xenophobia, you know, it's people say, you know, they're coming here, they're taking our jobs. That, you know, there's people in Australia or in England or in America or in Stockholm or in Germany or wherever you might happen to live. You know, we've got to look after our own. But you've also got to think about the incredible benefits that many, many countries have got from many generations of refugees. Think about Australia having been built on, you know, immigration. And so any time that xenophobia makes people close up rather than open out, I think it's important to challenge it. And
it's also about being a good human being, isn't it? You know, you think about, like, you talk about jobs, you're taking jobs and so on, and it's like, well, these people didn't leave out of, let's go on a holiday to this country and jump the queue. It's about they had no other option, and the stories you tell of people leaving their house with their children and having absolutely nothing and fleeing those places for their lives. You know, you think, well, as a human being, we need to help. We need to step up.
Well, and I think it's you have to say to yourself, what world do I want to live in, and what world do I want my children to live in? And certainly, you know, if it does feel like we're in a bit of a fork in the road, and I think it's very easy to lock down. It's more challenging and more rewarding to be, you know, compassionate, I think. And what was amazing when I was in Lebanon, because obviously there aren't any camps in Lebanon, and they've certainly had, you know, there's a lot of Syrian refugees within Lebanon. You know, I was at a community centre where a lot of the leaders of the various, you know, people, they would designate a leader to go and get some information and help and resources. And, you know, I went around the room and I asked them what they all did before they left Syria. And pharmacist, architect, lawyer, teacher, student, you know, there was community workers, you know, mother of 4. You know, they were people who were very much contributing, very proud, and people who didn't want to leave. Yeah. And, you know, like you don't go on a leaky boat, put your children on a boat with people smugglers unless you are absolutely desperate. Yeah. And I was talking to an architect there, a mother of 3, and she said, well, actually, I'm really sorry, I won't be here for the next meeting because I'm going to Greece. And we all said, what? And she said, you know, we're going on a boat to Greece because I'm trying to get up to Sweden because there's nowhere else for us to go. And you know, this was an intelligent, well-educated woman who was absolutely saw no other option available to her. And part of that is to, you know, that we can hopefully that the UNHCR can urge governments to focus on you know, on the 20th, 19th, and 20th in New York, is that governments have to really ensure that there are safe passages for people so that they don't have to take these illegal, dangerous routes to safety, because they are fleeing war, they are fleeing persecution, and they really do need our help and legislative help as well as, our hearts and our minds.
Absolutely. Now, in a minute, we're going to talk about the short film that you've made in support of the With Refugees campaign. But first, we're going to take some questions from people at home. Thank you. The first question is, what is the most surprising thing you found when you visited a refugee camp?
I think it's there's many. I think the fact that there's the amount of different professions who are there, and Zatri has been they've got their main shopping street is ironically called the Champs-Élysées, probably because of its length rather than any luxury. But the day that I was there, they were planning. There was a wedding going on. Life goes on, and that these people who have arrived with nothing. Are so resilient and so resourceful and so generous. And I think, there was one couple I met. He was a maths teacher who was very passionate about making sure that all the children in the camp were instilled with a love of mathematics. And he and his wife they'd met in the camp and had their first little daughter. And he took me out. And Azraq camp it's like a moonscape. There's nothing there. It's like the Little Prince, And he took me out into the little tiny courtyard. When I say tiny, it's literally like it's handkerchief size. And there he'd planted a little tree, and he'd developed this little ingenious way because there's no water, very little water, of watering it so this tree would stay alive. And he said, I want this tree to grow because it symbolises my daughter. And so, it's those things that I would do. I planted trees for my children, and that life goes on for them. And the fact that these places are teeming with life, with people with so little.
Beautiful. The second question is, how do you find common ground to connect with refugees when your lives are so different? How can you help connect them to the rest of the world?
I feel like it's luck and circumstance, really, for me. Sitting with people who they value education, they value their family, they would do anything for the life and safety of their children, and I don't see any difference really between those fundamental pillars of their life and fundamental pillars of my life. So I think it's when you realise that, and you look behind. The media wants to put a big sort of smokescreen between us and them, us sitting here in Queensland or wherever you may be sitting, and it's the common humanity, and the dignity and the respect and the fact that they so love the place that all the places that they've all come from, and have so much to offer.
Question 3: what one thing would you take with you if you had to flee your home?
Gosh, it's hard, isn't it?
It's difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
What would you take?
Firstly, my kids, my 3 young kids.
It does come down to that, doesn't it?
And it also, I was thinking before, you have to think, well, how long would I be away for? How long is this? Are we fleeing for a week and then coming back, or is this years?
Yeah.
And so where do you even start with that, And I remembered when I was younger, there's a bushfire coming through where we lived, and we had to do just that. It was like, okay, grab a couple of things and we have to leave the house. And
what did you take?
I took all sorts of silly kind of little knickknacks and this pocket knife my grandpa gave me and things, and photos and so on. And I guess now our photos are stored on phones,
But that's the thing, is that it's funny, you speak to people and they say, well, how can they be refugees? Because they've got a smartphone. Yeah. And you
think, a photo album.
Yeah, it's a photo album, but it holds all of your contacts.
Yeah.
And, that often parents are separated from their children. If I'm separated from my 14-year-old for an hour and a half, it's like, make sure you take your phone so I know where you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we were in Azraq camp, we were coming up, and they've got a fence with a whole lot of sort of black plastic bags, and there were a whole lot of mostly young boys right up against the side of the fence that went on for about a mile, And I thought, what are they doing? And they were trying to WhatsApp, get onto the Wi-Fi of the camp, because, you know, they're not trying to download games.
Yeah.
They're trying to message people back home.
Yeah.
Because when you know, these resilient people that you meet in the camp, when you see them break is when they talk about the people they've had to leave behind, either people who were too elderly to leave, or people who have gone missing and they don't know where they are.
Yeah.
So that ability to be in contact with people is massive. I mean, I hate my phone. You know, I feel like I'm a slave to it most of the time, but I think I'd probably take it with the kids too.
This is more about the world, the technological world that we live in, and the essential sort of item it is in those situations. And as you say, in order to keep in contact or you know, make sure there is a meeting place or so on, it's a piece of equipment.
You know, and as it goes on, you know, this is, as the crisis goes on and on and on, this time is that people are separated from their, you know, their place of birth is becoming longer and longer and longer. Sure.
And the final question, what more can governments do? They already give a lot of aid.
Yeah, I think aid is incredibly important, and that's an important. I think it's a big thing for people when they think about the refugee crisis, because I think, well, there's a lot of people in my own country who are struggling. Why are we giving money to refugees? But I think it's also, if the world is a very small place, and you know, you think about the Second World War, and the things we didn't know, the things we didn't do in any war. And this is a war of a different kind. And the war is raging in South Sudan, as it's raging in the Middle East. It's all over the place. And that you know, when half of those people who are being affected are children, then that aid is absolutely vital. But it's also it's burden sharing and making sure that there are safe avenues for people to seek safety, which every human being has the right to do, but also to, you know, as I said before, is to, in the case of Syria, to the government, UNHCR is just asking that the 10% of the Syrian refugees, so it's 480, the most vulnerable families are found places for around the world. And I think it's to cooperate and to take that pressure off the developing world.
Now, I wanted to come back to the film that you're launching today. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, it came out of an idea. We had a gathering to raise awareness and sort of reignite compassion, really, in London. And we read Jennifer Toksvig's poem, What They Took With Them, a List, which was based on first-person testimonial about just what we were saying before, about what would people take when they fled their home and didn't know whether they were leaving for 2 days, for 2 weeks or 2 years, because people do flee, often with only a moment's notice. And so Jennifer wrote and compiled this rhythmic, beautiful, powerful poem that not only contained very often very surprising objects that people took with them, refugees, but also has a rhythm and a heartbeat of the feeling of what it must be like to flee. And then Facebook got interested in it, and so we got together after that event, having read it, with a group of actors and musicians and writers. And so with Peter Capaldi, and I will forget names, with Stanley Tucci and myself and Chiwetel Ejiofor and Kit Harington, Douglas Booth, Keira Knightley did it, Juliet Stevenson, Jesse Eisenberg and Neil Gaiman. We read it in London, and then Facebook worked their magic on it. And so there's a 90-second version and a 5-minute version, and you can watch the film on the link above. It's up there somewhere. And I hope you do, because it's
incredibly powerful.
I think it does capture, you know, it's just those things. What would I take if I was in that same position? What would I do? What would be important to me? You know, what part of my life would I miss? You know, and for me, one of the powerful things in the poem is the word house keys. You know, house keys is that people take their house keys, you know, because they want to return home. They're not fleeing to come and take our jobs. They are fleeing often to a neighbouring country in the hope that they will be able to return next week. You know, I met a family just last week in Brisbane who she'd started a charity to help the education of girls in Afghanistan, and so their life very quickly became incredibly unsafe, and so they fled to Pakistan, and they were there for 3 months, and they kept trying to return, and it was impossible for them. So, because of the amazing work that they were doing, work that we in the West would really value, and they only took a small backpack with them because they thought they would be able to go back after a week or two, and so suddenly, it's like, as you were suggesting before, it turns into a much longer period of time.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly powerful, and as we talked about, it instantly puts you in that position and forces you to ask those same questions. What would I do? What would I take?
Yeah.
What does the future hold? Where are we going to go? How do we survive? And makes it much more personal as opposed to a sort of faceless, distant issue. It sort of drives it home for all of us and everyone who's watching at home. The same thing. But sadly, we've run out of time. And Cate, is there any last messages you'd like to share or say?
Well, I think watch the film, and I hope that there's some point in there that you might connect with or spark your interest. And if you do care, then sign the petition now, please, because it's, we've got, as I said, there's a million signatories already, and not just likes or shares, they're genuine sign-ups. And that will really have an influence. The bigger the number, the more the conversation will become more concrete, because we still do have the power of our voices. And you can go to withrefugees.org to sign up and put the pressure on our governments and ask them to step up to the plate. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.